I quietly left after discovering my wife's affair after 3.5 years of marriage. A year later, my ghosted ex-wife tracked me down after hearing of her own infidelity. I moved to the hills. Not entirely sure why, but perhaps now, writing this will be helpful to someone. Now that the incident is over and I've moved on, maybe sharing my story will bring some clarity to others walking a similar path. In February 2018, after 3.5 years of marriage, I learned of my wife's affair. I was working a contract job that occasionally required extensive travel, but it also allowed me to work from home when I wasn't on the road. At the time, I was the director of a technical sales company, while my wife held a very lucrative position of her own. Although things between us had become a little strained, largely due to her working increasingly long hours, and me being away for work, we still had what I would have called a fairly excellent marriage. To offer a bit of background, 5 years earlier, I met the woman who became my wife, now my ex, at a cookout hosted by a mutual acquaintance. We immediately clicked when we started talking. To be honest, I felt that being with a woman who was not only attractive but articulate was a huge advantage for someone like me, rough around the edges. Somehow, that appealed to her. After a few weeks of dating, we found ourselves completely smitten. Whenever we met at each other's apartments, the clothes practically flew off. After 18 months of dating, we got married and moved into a large apartment while saving up for a down payment on a home. But things began to change after the first 3 years of marriage. Even though I still had strong feelings for her, I noticed she began to argue over the smallest things. Whenever I brought up her late hours or her increasingly frequent work outings, she would grow irate. Since she had been climbing the corporate ladder, she always claimed that these demands were necessary, just part of paying her dues. At least that was her justification. She reminded me that I was away for weeks at a time and therefore had no right to question her schedule. In reality, I had only been taking short work trips, about 3 or 4 days every 5 weeks or so I assured her that I could absolutely cut back on my travel to support her. But there was never a resolution to these highly circular arguments. Looking back now, I realize I had no idea she was having an affair. Aside from our steadily declining sex life and her consistently late hours, there were no glaring red flags. I simply assumed she was exhausted from work. Still, being rejected so often when I tried to initiate intimacy had begun to wear heavily on my self-esteem. Although she had a work-issued mobile phone and might have been using it for private conversations, I never checked. I trusted her. I didn't witness the covert texting I'd read about in other stories. Kathy used our spare bedroom as a home office and spent a lot of time there. Around September 2017, she began returning home from work only to head right back out for evening work engagements. What started as 1 night a week quickly escalated to more than 3 nights weekly. Although I'm not naturally jealous, I knew she would inevitably attract attention, especially in her line of work. She interacted with more male CEOs than female ones, and while she gave off the impression of being focused on her job, I couldn't ignore the obvious. Still, I suppressed my doubts until about a month before D-Day. One day, Kathy made a quick stop at the supermarket before coming home and asked me to help unload the groceries. As I retrieved a few items from the backseat of her car, I noticed something pink peeking out from beneath the front passenger seat. It was a bra, hers. I recognized it instantly, knowing her preferred lingerie store. That alone should have been the warning sign. She always removed her bra from under her clothes when she was in a particularly lustful mood. Seeing it like that made me feel physically sick. I couldn't understand why it was under the seat. My heart was pounding almost violently. When I walked into the kitchen with the bags, Kathy took one look at me and asked how I was feeling, saying I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I said nothing. It took everything in me to mask my reaction and not appear suspicious or betrayed. That night, I made the decision to find out the truth. I began reflecting on all the possible signs I might have missed. Other than the bra, I had no concrete evidence. She worked in a downtown office, and we lived in a fairly large city, making it difficult to track her movements. Still, I decided to push the affair theory to the back of my mind and instead try to be more present in our relationship. I went all in. I cooked a delicious meal, set the dining table with our best plates and silverware, added candles, everything. That Friday, I also bought a beautiful flower arrangement and a nice bottle of wine. When she walked in, breezing through the door as usual, I excitedly pointed out the dinner and everything I had done. But she apologized immediately and said she had to head out again to a neighborhood hangout to meet coworkers. She added she needed to shower first, but could grab a quick snack with me before leaving. I fell silent. My insides flipped. I won't go into detail about the kind of anger building inside me, but I'd had enough. While she was showering, I quietly tossed my work phone into the back seat of her car. I had been considering using it as a way to track her. Then I walked into the kitchen and threw the dinner, wine, and flowers straight into the garbage. After her shower, she got dressed, looking stunning as always. "All right, let's eat." "Never mind. Go out with your friends." She paused, giving me a confused look. "Are you mad?" "I'm sad. Sad that you never want to do anything with me." She scoffed, got upset, and sarcastically accused me of having a short fuse, telling me to stop acting like a child. I muttered under my breath, "Foolish me." As I stood there, letting everything sink in, I couldn't shake the feeling that we should have spent the evening together for once. But instead, she simply gave me a sly smile and stormed off. I pulled out my second phone and began tracking my work phone, which I had placed in her car earlier. About 20 minutes later, she arrived at the bar she frequently visited with her coworkers. When she stopped moving, I made the decision to drive over and see for myself. Sure enough, her car was parked in the lot of the bar. I waded across the street in my car, feeling like a stalker, something I never imagined myself becoming. But I kept telling myself this wasn't paranoia, it was about confronting the truth. An hour passed before I saw her exit the bar. She was with a man who looked like a polished executive, likely someone from her company. I watched, numb, as he pulled her close and kissed her on the lips. My body went completely cold. My stomach tightened into knots as I watched them get into another car together. When they pulled out of the parking lot, I followed at a safe distance. You guessed it. They drove to a hotel about 10 minutes away. I stopped on the street nearby and watched as they exited the vehicle, still holding hands, and walked into the hotel together. That was it. I had seen enough. I felt foolish and betrayed. I pounded the steering wheel in frustration. Something inside me shut off. I don't know if I had an out-of-body experience or simply blacked out from the emotional overload, but everything felt unreal. As I slowly came to my senses, the only thing I could think of was getting a drink. That moment marked the beginning of a path I never anticipated my life would take. I drove aimlessly, crying, not just from heartbreak, but from rage. Eventually, I stumbled upon a small tavern about 30 miles outside of town. I pulled in and took a seat at the bar. The bartender, a woman with kind eyes, looked over me and said, "You look like someone knocked the wind out of your sails." I offered a half smile. "You could say that." A man sat beside me and started making conversation, even though I wasn't in the mood. But there was something calming about him, something solid. We got to talking, and eventually I told him about my wife's affair and how I just wanted to get away from her and forget she ever existed. "You're not alone, buddy," he said, patting my back. "I've been through it too, a few years ago. I think there's always a reason for things like this. Your life can go in two directions now, positive or negative. It's completely up to you." His words hit me like a jolt of clarity. Despite the pain, I've always been able to think rationally, and I knew he was right. We introduced ourselves. His name was Ray. I liked him right away. He had that grounded, salt-of-the-earth kind of vibe. He was more of a country guy, but there was wisdom in his words. "You're going to move out?" he asked. I shrugged. "I suppose. I haven't really thought that far ahead. Right now, I just know I can't stay around her any longer." "I have an idea," Ray said, voice full of sympathy. "I've got a mobile trailer on my land. It needs a little work, and it's nothing fancy, but you're welcome to check it out. If you like it, you can stay there for a while. I'll give you a good deal. There's a nice piece of property, too, and I'd appreciate someone looking after it." "To escape your predicament. Just a thought," Ray said. I took a moment to comprehend his suggestion. "Hell, honey, if I could have escaped my crazy ex-husband years ago, I would have jumped at the chance to go live in that trailer, or anything, just to get my head on straight," added the bartender, who had clearly been listening to our conversation. Perhaps this really was what I needed. Still, I felt as though I had wandered into the twilight zone. "Yes, I'll think about it. Maybe I'll check it out," I replied to Ray. After a while, we parted ways and agreed to meet again, at his house in a few days. I began to feel as though I had gained some perspective, an opportunity to escape what I thought was a terrible heartache combined with a nightmarish reality. One thing was certain. I never, ever wanted to spend another moment with my wife again. I find cheating to be disgusting. It's always been the one thing I knew I could never tolerate. Later that evening, when I got home, I slumped onto the couch. Kathy emerged from the bedroom and asked, "Where have you been?" I looked at her and calmly asked, "Where have you been?" "You know, I went to grab drinks," she said, playing it casual. I decided to go straight for it. "Are you having an affair?" She looked genuinely surprised at first, but quickly composed herself. "No, why would you ask me that? I heard you might be seeing someone at work," I said. Her face changed slightly. "Who told you that?" she asked. "Someone I know," I replied, refusing to give up the name. "You're being ridiculous," she said, now defensive. "You're drunk or crazy." Then she flipped the script and began questioning my whereabouts. "We're just going to a bar to have some drinks with our friends," I said, trying to deflect the attention from me. Despite her obvious curiosity, she said nothing further. Instead, she turned around and went to bed. Now that I had proof that she'd been deceiving me for months, I couldn't sleep. I chose the couch that night, haunted by visions of her in bed with that man. I felt sorry for myself, disgusted, and deeply hurt. But then, I thought about Ray's trailer. Oddly, the thought cheered me up. It was almost like a revelation. Maybe something was wrong with me, because in the middle of this pain, my fight or flight response had kicked in, and I was absolutely leaning toward flight. The next morning passed in awkward silence, as if nothing had happened. We carried on with the weekend like two strangers. A few days later, I scheduled the meeting with Ray. When I arrived at his ranch, I was surprised by how beautiful it was. The trailer itself was actually quite nice, about 26 feet long and fully furnished. It even reminded me of a spring break trip I'd taken with friends in college. Ray accepted the money I offered him for the trailer, though honestly, it felt like I was stealing it for the price. He gave me directions, and I drove over to see the property where it would be placed. The area was stunning.
There were biking and hiking trails nearby, thick trees and lush scrubland. Ray had a little cabin on a hilltop overlooking the land, with water and electricity already available for the trailer. It was near the foothills of some modest mountains. He promised to set up the trailer and haul it to the location for me. Over the following few weeks, I tried several times to get Kathy to come clean, but all I got was gaslighting. Even when I bluntly warned her that there would be no turning back if I discovered she was cheating, she only sank deeper into her affair fog. She began lashing out at me, her denials more desperate and less convincing each day. At one point, the denial became so absurd that I nearly laughed. I scolded myself for ever believing the woman she used to be still existed. I regretted not capturing pictures of the two of them. I had no tangible evidence that she had cheated. But even without it, I decided I wanted to leave this marriage after going through such emotional anguish. Instead of communicating my feelings to Kathy, I simply began planning. While she was at work, I started quietly removing my possessions from the apartment and transferring them to the trailer. At least it felt like I was doing something about it. I noticed a difference in Kathy during this period. Although she had started behaving more politely toward me, I believed it was too little, too late. I felt I needed a break too, so while she kept going on company outings after work, I made my own plans. One night, as she was leaving, I got ready as well. Glancing at me, she inquired about my destination. All I said was, meeting up with some friends. You wouldn't enjoy all the shop talk, and you don't know them. I interrupted her as she began to ask more questions. Ironically, she used to say precisely this to me whenever I asked if I could accompany her on office excursions. All right, have a good time, she added, with a somewhat offended expression. I definitely will, I replied. I began making new acquaintances while working on the trailer and hanging out with Rye at the bar. I felt better after spending time with Rye's wonderful family and friends. I also made the decision to cut back on my drinking because I didn't want to form any unhealthy habits. I knew better than to drown myself in sympathy, even though it would have been so simple. At this point, Kathy informed me that the following week she would be traveling for work. She stated that the executive team and a few department heads were going. When I inquired who else was attending, I added, I hope you have a great time with your boyfriend, glancing at her. I immediately regretted saying that, as it sparked a furious argument. But as Rye had informed me, it didn't really matter. I now regret not knowing more about her affair partner, AP. It doesn't matter who the other guy is, Rye replied. The fact that she chose to leave you is all that matters. She destroyed the marriage whether she admits it or not, brother. Facts are facts. Rye ought to write a book for the betrayed. Damn it. I had the ideal opportunity to move out entirely during Kathy's work vacation. When she was gone, I collected everything valuable that was mine. Clothes, laptops, equipment. I didn't take any shared goods or furniture. Before I left, I wrote a note. It was originally a lengthy explanation, but I chose to make it brief. I simply wrote, "You hope it was worth it," on a piece of paper. On top of the note, on the kitchen table, I set my wedding ring. I felt like a great weight had been lifted as I left. I was liberated. The hurt would take time to heal, and there would be emotional baggage to cope with, but I had started. I needed time to myself, to quickly and quietly get rid of her. The fact that I hadn't challenged her or coerced a confession didn't make me proud. I hadn't screamed or shouted. She didn't deserve it, in my opinion. She had disregarded everything we owned, our plans for the future, our aspirations for a home and a family, and now it was all gone. There was no turning back. I owed her absolutely nothing. She could handle the consequences. I hadn't planned anything or called a lawyer. I just wanted a new beginning and some clarity. The air from the mountains was just what I needed. When I got inside my trailer, I resumed running the next week, and it was wonderful to be alive. While Kathy was away, she texted things like, "We just landed, we're having a team dinner," and so on. A few of her messages asked, "Where are you?" or "Why haven't you gotten back to me?" I didn't answer. My phone exploded with calls and texts when she got home. She kept trying to get in touch with me, but I ignored her. Her mother also tried to call me after the first day, but I didn't pick up. She didn't try to engage my father because we're not close, and he's the only member of my family that I still have. Her messages grew more urgent after a week of being ignored. "What is this?" was one of the texts she sent. "We must speak. I don't know what you think you know, but nothing is happening. There isn't an affair going on." She finally texted me after a week of silence, saying, "I'm sorry, things got out of hand." It didn't matter. I was involved with someone at work. You were absent a lot while I was preoccupied with my job. I simply made an error. I intended to terminate it. That was what she finally admitted. I had been waiting for this confession all along, yet somehow it only made me detest her more. Why was she unable to be truthful from the beginning? I didn't have any dreams about a future with this woman anymore. Errors don't persist for 6 to 8 months or a year. Her pleas for me to return and work on the marriage eventually grew pitiful. I refused to respond to her, even after she stopped bothering me for a few weeks. I didn't want her to learn where I lived or snoop around in my life. I didn't want my haven to be destroyed by this woman. She then began sending nasty texts like, "You're a coward. One day you refuse to speak to me. You have no regard for us. Come home, please, so we can discuss. You're where I am able to visit you. Paul, please, let's chat and make things right. Damn it." Although I don't recall all of the texts, they all appear to be excuses with minimal genuine regret. In one ear, I let them go, and in the other, out. After a while, I switched my mobile number. Update, June 2018.
I received an email from Kathy informing me that she had hired a lawyer and was going to file for divorce. I just said, okay, that sounds good. This led to a barrage of emails requesting that I visit her and other things. She wrote that she would stop bothering me if I consented to an uncontested divorce. After realizing that wouldn't work and I consented, I was genuinely free. A few months later, after I moved out of our apartment, I never had to see her again. She seemed to care more about that than I did, even though neither of us had any closure. I would occasionally think of her for a few months, and yes, the grief would suddenly come to me, like when I heard a song we used to enjoy. After a while, though, I simply stopped thinking about her. Update 2. Now that I'm officially divorced, things are going great. In actuality, I got to know a wonderful girl just down the hill from my house. I was running on the trail. We clicked when I helped her replace a flat tire. Despite being a few years younger than me, she is fantastic and quite adorable. She refers to me as her mountain man and adores my way of life. Although I'm not in a rush to commit, I also don't intend to give up on women entirely. I have no intention of moving out of the trailer anytime soon. I enjoy being outdoors and have simplified my life. It made everything easier for me, including the grief and my ex-wife. I know that everyone responds to these situations in a unique way. I was fortunate to be in my 3rd year of marriage and not yet a parent. I believe I acted in my own best interests. You don't have to spend your entire life with someone who cheats. If you experience something similar, try not to think about it too much. Continue living your life. As you improve yourself, it will get better. I hope everyone has the finest possible life. I've revised this roughly 5 times to make it readable, and I just wanted to give you an update on my ex-wife's condition. I was worried that my ex-wife was attempting to find me. As I indicated in my earlier post, I left our previous residence, which was around 2 hours away. I ran into her last weekend at a coffee shop I often visit in the town close to my home. It didn't seem like a coincidence to me. Fortunately, I managed to escape before she noticed me. 3rd update. I went into town this past weekend to get groceries and made a stop at my normal coffee establishment. I was using their free internet to work on some paperwork for work. I finished and walked out of the coffee shop. I was on the way to my pickup when I heard someone shout, "Paul!" When I turned to look across the street, I saw Kathy. She was waving at me, my ex-wife. Finally, Armageddon had arrived. She hurried across the street toward me, and I stood there in disbelief, as though anticipating an embrace. She walked over and extended her hand. I stopped her in her tracks by instinctively holding out my arms with my palms up. She appeared to be in severe pain. Then she added, "I've been searching for you, Paul. I've wanted to see you since I heard you moved here. Can we have a conversation?" Guys, I felt like an animal confined in a cage.
Yes, I did, I finally said. All right, let's find a table or something and we can talk for a minute. I gave in. When she asked if we could go to my house, I firmly refused. Instead, we walked down to a bench outside a small store. She followed me, heels clicking softly behind. As we sat, she began with a compliment, remarking how much I had changed, how much she liked my new appearance. She went on about my beard and my improved fitness, raving about how my body had transformed. She wore a tank top, small white shorts, and had her hair tied back in a ponytail, just the way I used to like it. She was clearly putting on the charm, her radar locked on to old triggers, but mine was set higher. I could tell she was trying to reel me in with sex appeal. I had to stay in control, calm, cool, because I needed to know where this was really going. She started by saying she was sorry for the affair. She claimed that after I left, karma hit her hard. When her employer found out about the relationship, the tension became unbearable and she eventually resigned. Her affair partner, AP, who had been engaged at the time, took the heat. He was transferred to a different department. When he blamed her for everything, she told his fiancé the truth, which led to their breakup. At this point, she bowed her head and began to cry. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, looking around, emotionless. Then she sat up straight, staring at me for a long while. "What do you want from me?" I asked finally. She insisted she had never intended to have an affair, that the politics and pressure at the company had pulled her in, that AP used his charm and status to manipulate her. She admitted that she was just as responsible, that they had taken advantage of each other. She claimed that she wanted to confess after I confronted her, that she drank after work to numb the guilt, and that she loathed herself for what she'd done. She said her heart shattered the moment I walked away. She ended the affair soon after, but by then it was too late. She said she'd been trying to find me, hoping for a chance at reconciliation, even though we were already divorced. I stared at her, and then I said it. "You have no right to come out here and try to undo all the harm you've done. Do you think I'll just forget everything? That I'll overlook what you did to destroy our marriage?" I didn't raise my voice, but it was sharp and cold. As I said before, we're done. You cheated. Forgiveness doesn't exist. Not for that. This relationship will not be restarted. You murdered it the moment you left me. You ruined everything we had. How foolish do you think I am? Her face went pale. "One evening, I watched you walk into that hotel with him. Were you aware of that?" My voice must have gotten louder because I noticed a few people glancing over. Kathy reached for my arm, her face crumpling as she began to cry. She sobbed against my shoulder. I let her, for a moment, then I gently pushed her away. "I deserve this," she whispered, eyes red and wet. "I know I do, but if nothing else, can I take you out to dinner? Please, I just want to talk. I want us to be transparent. I want to spend time with you, more than I did before." She grabbed my hands. "Paul, please, I love you so much. I know you may not want to hear that, but before you left me, I didn't even realize how much I loved you. You broke me, just as much as I broke you. I can't forgive myself, and I don't want to, not until the day I die." She broke down again, this time sobbing and hyperventilating. I stood, lifted her up, and held her gently. It felt like the only way to calm her down, though every fiber of me screamed not to fall into old patterns. Eventually, we found a quieter spot to continue talking. Once she had settled, I asked, "How did you find me? Did you hire a private investigator?" She chuckled softly and said no. After a pause, she explained that she bumped into Stacy a few weeks prior and casually asked about me. Stacy had initially kept quiet. She'd promised me she would, but Kathy kept pushing until she gave up some vague details. All Stacy knew was that I lived somewhere nearby.
When she told me she'd been coming into town on her days off to check on me, I couldn't help but laugh. "Damn, Stacy really can't keep her trap shut," I muttered. Kathy blushed in response. Eventually, we decided to have dinner at a charming little spot with a patio. I made sure we didn't have any drinks. I wasn't going to give her the excuse to be overly nice or say she was too buzzed to drive home. To my surprise, we actually had a good conversation. When dinner ended, I walked her to her vehicle. She insisted that she hadn't dated anyone else since I left. She swore, almost desperately, that I was the only person she wanted. She begged me to stay longer, but I shook my head. "No, it's still way too early for me to go down that road," I told her. She pleaded again for me to come back, but I never said yes. I gave her my new email address, but not my phone number. "You'll just blow it up with texts and calls," I told her plainly. She wept, but eventually agreed with my choice. She promised to send me an email about coming back to town the following weekend. Before she got into her car, I asked her something I had been holding in for a long time. "Would you have forgiven me if I had been the one cheating?" She paused, really thinking it over. "Yes, in time, but only if we saw a marriage counselor and worked through the healing process, with a lot of talking, maybe even a binding agreement," she finally replied. "All right," I said. "Maybe I could do that, in 5 or 10 years. She replied without hesitation. I would wait, if that's what it would take. Then she reached out, took both my hands in hers, and looked directly into my eyes. "God damn it, Paul," she said. "I will always love you, and I'll do anything to prove it." Her words hit harder than I expected. They echoed in my mind long after she drove away. She had said them with such conviction, such force, and yet I couldn't picture us getting back together. Not now. Maybe not ever. I felt better, yes, but not enough to consider her even a friend yet. Perhaps someday, but even that remained uncertain. That night I went home, took a long run, had a cold beer, and thought about everything I'd been through. I had come so far. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, could someone promise me that she wouldn't somehow destroy the peace I'd worked so hard to create? I didn't know. What I did know, though, was that I had time. Time to reflect, to heal, to sort through what was real and what wasn't. The images of betrayal were still too vivid, too raw. Final update. This is most likely the last update I'll ever write. When I first uploaded my story to Reddit, the moderators kept taking it down. In summary, I ghosted my ex-wife for more than a year. She finally found me. She wanted to apologize, to rebuild, to start again. And you'll be deeply disappointed, because I didn't. I chose peace. And that's where it ends. If you thought I'd be the typical beta blue pill fool who forgives her, you're wrong. Last week, she sent me a lengthy email filled with declarations of love and regret for the affair. She even offered to come out and stay with me for the weekend. My response? Silence. I told her I had no interest in making amends. I'm completely content living alone, embracing the peace of my secluded life, and keeping things simple. At 32, I'm in no rush to change a thing. I have a plan for myself and have been enjoying the company of a few friends and women, nothing complicated, just real. In my reply, I made it crystal clear. Reconciliation wasn't an option. And no, she couldn't have my number. I don't know or trust you anymore. You made your bed. I wish you well, and maybe someday we can be friends, but not now. That must have hit a nerve, because she responded in a very telling way. She admitted she'd accepted a job in another state. Her real hope had been that I'd join her, thinking my remote work would make it easy. She wanted us to run away, to start fresh somewhere new. She planned to visit me in person, to convince me before she left, but time ran out. I was scheduled for a week of business travel, and honestly, I'm relieved. She'll soon realize that her time in my life is over. Sure, I might get a few more emails, but that chapter is closed. She'll have to find someone else. And who knows, maybe she'll cheat on him too. To anyone listening, live your life boldly. Let go of the past. Give yourself the strength to move forward. Wishing all of you the best, and thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. She thought I'd wait. That after all the lies, the betrayal, the months of silence, I'd still be there, arms open, heart ready to forgive. But she never realized I didn't disappear to punish her. I vanished to protect my peace. And in that silence, I found myself again. No more second chances. No more what-ifs. Just a man who walked through the fire, alone, and came out stronger. She's a ghost from a life I've outgrown, and some ghosts are meant to stay behind.